Well, we've moved on, and obviously not everybody has, so we'll answer some questions on whatever that is that we need to answer. But it's tough to continue to dwell upon those things. You got to learn from them, but you got to move forward. And so the challenge has been, for our guys in particular, is how do we move forward and how do we move on? And can you we don't have the old Men in Black little thing that we kind of zap and everybody could forget about it and continue to move forward. So it's a real challenge for your mind and the things that you allow to creep in, because that ultimately will continue to hold us back. So again, we went out a little bit later on Sunday and moved around and got them in and got them out of here as you would normally do in the last couple of weeks of the season. But the bodies aren't exactly what I worry about. It's the minds. And so everything that we do is trying to make sure we can open it up, get guys to communicate, but find ways to control not just your mind, the things that you take into your mind, that self-talk that you have, because there's an opportunity in front of us that we sometimes cannot see, but we need to take advantage of. And so there's a challenge in front of us as a team, as a coaching staff, as an entire program, and now we got to meet the challenge.
When you came into this program, you said that the culture was pretty well set here, and you felt good about it. When you question things about like buy-in, things like that, do you worry about that?
I didn't say anything about buy-in.
Well, some of the players were saying that.
So maybe the players do, and just so you guys know, I would imagine that the players will speak a lot more freely. And I don't mean that I don't want to say them, but like there's things that you talk about within your family that you don't talk about outside your family. And, I remind those guys that, look, I will never call you out in the media. I'll never call you out in the public, but I sure as hell will call you out in front of our family. And so there are things that, we have to be accountable for. And, but in the big picture of it, I'm responsible. And so I put it on my shoulders to make sure that we all are on the same page. And it's the nature of the things that you learn when you go through real adverse situations. And you can think you know what you're looking at, in an off season, in the spring and in the summer, and but nobody can prepare themselves for the real adverse situations. And so all of us are figuring out how we handle things together, whether we're the coaching staff or the players.
Luke, I wanted to ask you about Marty Streater, since it's going to be senior day this week. He's a co-captain, doesn't necessarily play a ton on defense, but what have you seen from him in terms of leadership and work ethic throughout this first year?
Marty just does a great job. I mean, there's nobody more positive and more upbeat than Marty. Marty was somebody I didn't know, and I got to know him a little bit, through the, maybe not as much in the spring because, he didn't play a ton, but, you had him on a bunch of special teams, and then you get to know him a little bit more, in the fall, or in the summer, and then all of a sudden, you kind of go to vote for captains and you see the respect that he has amongst his entire team. And so, not that all of a sudden changed my opinion of Marty, but it, through the season, it's given me an opportunity to, understand, know him a little bit better and see his consistency that he has been for us, not just as a player, because, he only has a certain role, which is important, but his consistency as a leader, his consistency as a guy that's an example and a motivator.
Luke, at Cincinnati in your first year, you guys went through adversity going 4-8. Here in your first year, there's also been some adversity. Which experience do you think has been tougher adversity-wise, and also how are you guys able to kind of turn it around so quickly in your second year, going 11-2?
Well, everything is its own entity, and I would tell you that this is much more difficult. And not because I think I know more, because in year one I had, not a great clue as to what was going on, but I think every place you go to, things are new and different. But I don't know, maybe it's the expectations that we walked into. Maybe it's what I truly had envisioned, the things I thought we could be as we grew. And then obviously there's some situations that have, caused us, injuries and things like that to put us in a little bit of a different mode. But in general, I think it just, I have an expectation for myself and the things that we do that were far greater now than they were 7 years ago. And so this is and continues to be and is a hell of a lot more challenging.
the strength of Nebraska's team has been their defense, and I'm just curious, what have you seen from that unit? What kind of stands out to you about them on that side of the ball?
Well, they've settled in a little bit more to, what they are. I think early in the year they were still bouncing around defensively as to what they were going to be, whether it's some 3 down, some 4 down and stuff, but you've seen the consistency. You've seen them grow. You've seen them, play physical and fast. I think that's the thing that you can, watch from game 1 to, game 10 is there's a growth, there's a physicality that you saw from the get-go, but there's a lot more, I don't want to say structure, but there's a lot more consistency in everything that they've done defensively, I think, in the last 4 to 5 weeks in particular.
Luke, is building a culture in the world of NIL and transfer portal more difficult? Because you've now done it both. Do you find this more challenging?
This is, obviously, I don't know. NIL's only been around for a couple years. The transfer portal's only been around for a couple years as well. I mean, we're getting into the eras where you're seeing how these things affect, your programs and your teams and your environments, not to mention your culture. I don't know that it's any more difficult. It's just, I think, a little bit trickier, is do you look for a quick fix? Do you look for the things that you believe are sustainable and last? And, you can get, misled, or you can get misguided, or you can get antsy, trying to do it a way that you might not think is the best way possible. But I think that it's just another kind of thing that you have to be able to navigate in all that you're building.
Luke, Vinny Anthony is a guy that got more playing time last week. What went into the decision to give him more snaps, and just what have you seen from him over the course of the year that gives you confidence?
Obviously, the situations, the health of a lot of guys, but I think the following last week, the week before, where all of a sudden he's the kick returner, he's the punt returner, he makes some plays. You see the aggressiveness, you see the spark that he provided a little bit in a couple weeks ago, and I think that's how guys don't understand. That's how playing time starts to happen. It's not everybody's granted the opportunity because they go to practice, because they work hard in practice. No, I mean, some guys are granted some opportunities because, of misfortunes that happen, and then others are granted because all of a sudden you see them earn, the opportunities and earn their growth of opportunities. And he's one that I like to say has done it the old-fashioned way, that all of a sudden he had some opportunities and went in there and made some really, really good plays and provided some spark, and we'll continue to see more.
Nebraska had a job opening last year at the same time Wisconsin did. I don't know if that was one that you considered at the time or were interested in, but can you recall what your impressions were of the program at that time and where they've come?
No, I didn't know what the impressions of the program here was, right? I mean, I was locked in and focused into the things that I was doing. We had some ups and downs as well. So, no, I don't. To be honest with you, I don't know what it's like in any other program. I got buddies that are coaches. I got buddies that are head coaches. I don't know what it's like in theirs, and not that we don't talk at times. But I think when you're all in, when you're enthralled into what it is you're doing, it's really hard to try to say. And I know that a lot of people would say, hey, if you're going to, when those guys are job searching, they start to, their guys give them packets, and this is what I was given a packets last year or 2 years ago. I don't know that I ever opened them, to be honest with you. And you'd say that's not the smartest thing in the world, but it's just, look, when you're into what you're into, if all of a sudden something changes and you make a decision to go, if it's because of where the program is at that time, then you're probably making it for the wrong decisions. So I don't know where they were. I know that from where they were at the start of the year to where they are now, I think they've done a really, really good job.
What's probably the most challenging aspect of trying to get guys to turn the page when there's this level of frustration and, like I said earlier, like maybe questioning if everybody around them is on the same page?
Well, I think that we as coaches got to be the example of turn the page too. I got to walk in here on Sunday and put the thing to rest and move forward and not dwell upon it. So sometimes talking about these things that, on a Monday is not moving forward, but there's things we have to be able to do. I don't think there's any one thing. I think not say uniqueness of today, because social media has been around for a long time and opinions have been around forever, whether it's talk radio but it's the ability to kind of just kind of lock in. It's the ability to not allow those things to take you back to a place that you don't want to be, and you got to be able to control the things that go into your head, because our minds all race. I told them that they're no different than me. I'm no different than them in a lot of those things. But what we can control, we've got to be able to control.
Turnovers are kind of a streaky thing, they get up and down that way. But and especially in the last couple games when the defense hasn't been able to create any turnovers, I guess I'm wondering when you're looking at the tape or the film of the game, are you seeing guys doing the things necessary to at least give them a chance for turnovers?
Yeah, we got later in the game and you saw some guys doing the things that you work every week about stripping at balls and balls that go in the air, balls that are tipped, balls that are overthrown or underthrown. You got to be able to make those plays. We had one last week, but we're not putting people into situations where they have to be a little bit more aggressive too. And I think when you don't do that, then people aren't taking as many chances and some things like that. And now there's not as many opportunities. Now there's always an opportunity a guy carries the ball, but that punching a ball out just doesn't happen all that often. It's more the pressure on quarterbacks. It's more of forcing them into doing things they don't want to do, making them have to be aggressive because of the nature and the way the game is going. And that's that complementary football that right now we're just not finding a way to be able to do. So when you aren't putting some more of those pressures on people, it's harder to create those turnovers.
Coach, the first time we had seen Christian Argo, you had said in that Illinois game, it was those last plays where he was kind of essentially tailed to the quarterback. We saw him a couple of times in third down packages yesterday. Just wanted to ask what he provides to you in
Provide
those
a
situations.
sack, one of the highlights. But he was going to have a larger role in some of those situations and some of the third down stuff. Last week changed a little bit based on the quarterback. Last week changed a little bit based on, the nature of the game and where we were, especially on third downs because we weren't very good. But he's a guy that's going to continue to get more and more. He's got more and more special teams wise. I thought last week did a great job on special teams, made a couple tackles on the kickoff. Obviously had a sack. He's a guy when you start to talk about towards the end of the year, people always ask about youth movement. And there's not a ton of, maybe youth right now that you'd say is movement, but Christian is probably one of those guys that for sure is going to see a lot more.
So with Luke, with senior day altogether, and the class of seniors, that could be potentially their last game. Are there any messages that you can give, especially for a class that's gone on, through the adversity and starting off maybe with like a Rose Bowl appearance and now going through with what they're going through right now?
Yeah, no, I don't know that there's any. This is a part of life, and there's ups and there's downs, and ultimately, what I've always kind of said to them is sometimes, when you walk away, you want to be able to look back. Your leadership is not evaluated just on how the year goes. To be honest with you, to me, your leadership is evaluated on what it's like when you leave. So that next group, that what happens beyond this year when you walk away. Did you set an example? Did you set the tone? Doesn't always show up sometimes in that last year or in that senior year, but as you move forward, what does it look like? Did you put it in a better place? Not just then when you got it, but even then maybe it was the year before. And, so it's a tough time, obviously, the last home game. Senior day for everybody is always one of those unique situations. But that's, for us, why we want to, put that much more on this thing because, those guys have meant an incredible amount to this program over whether it's 4 or 5 years. And, they deserve a lot.
Luke, it's probably an inexact science when you're bringing people in or when you're recruiting. How do you try and figure out whether someone is what you would consider to be a good fit to build to a program? And can you always know until you get into the wars here in a season?
No, we never really know. It's just like with coaches. You don't really know each other until you've gone through adversity, right? I mean, so you do your best homework. You try to make sure you're really honest, and that's what we want to be in recruiting. We're really, really honest with people and kids, and to make sure that when they're making a decision that they're not being swayed by the wrong things, right? I mean, you want them to know this is going to be a really difficult, tough, hard-nosed program. And if that's, if you like a little bit more of the fluff and some of that, then, by nature, maybe they don't choose this. And so, there's a lot of those things because you can't rip open the chest and be able to evaluate the heart. But you got to do your best job. You got to ask the right questions. When you're recruiting the areas where you know best, you probably can get some better insight based on the people that you know. But still, I mean, every kid in our program for the most part, was the best player on their team, and I'm sure their high school coach in the most ways loved them, because of what they provided. But that doesn't always translate in everything that you're doing. So it is an imperfect science, but you've got to do a hell of a lot better job making sure that you're evaluating and finding the right ones.
Luke, as you studied the last couple of games, have you been able to find maybe a through line or something that you can start correcting to help the run game out? Is it as simple as just not having Braylon, or what do you think is?
No, there's a combination of those things. I think the hard part is when you lose a little bit of confidence in it. And we all know that, like, when you pound the rock, at some point in time, the rock just doesn't split on the first pound. And, but when you don't have maybe the utmost confidence in, whether it's your depth or can you consistently do that, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And, so sometimes you have a plan going in to be able to do that. And then, unfortunately, last week, the situation of the game didn't allow for it as much and makes you change. But those are all the things that we have got to do a better job of. Those are all the things we can't allow ourselves to get in a situation where we can say we're dictated by what we want to do based on personnel, right? I know injuries happen, but we've got to build the confidence, that if an injury happens, then you go to your second or your third. Like, you got to have confidence that those guys are still able to do, and you believe in the things that you're going to do so you can continue to, have consistency.
Couldn't let you leave without the weekly Braylon Allen update question. One, I just kind of want to get an idea of, was he able to kind of get out there a little bit on Sunday? And are you optimistic that maybe he'll get a chance to practice Tuesday and Wednesday?
I don't know. We'll have to see. Last week he didn't do a bunch, and it was, going to be a game time decision, and we'll have to see this week. And, I couldn't answer that. Obviously, moved around a little bit last night, but we did not do a ton. So it wasn't like we could evaluate a lot of guys on anything that we did last night. Normally we do maybe a little bit more, but in the last 2-3 weeks of the season, sometimes Sundays become lighter and lighter and a little bit more mental work. So we hope, but we'll have to see.